Recording started.
Recording has started.
Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you are listening to the VMware Community's Roundtable Podcast. This is podcast number 639. My name is Eric Nilsson. With me today, I have my favorite co-host, Corey Romero. Today is Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023. Corey, how's it going?
Eric, it's going really, really well. I actually just tabbed over to the podcast screen here since we started, and I noticed you're in the office. Very cool to see.
Yeah,
very cool to see.
We are running CTAB, and the interesting thing about the office here is that all the trees have grown up an extra 10 feet since I've been here. So you can barely see the mountains now because I'm like, give me my chainsaw. I want to see the mountains.
A whole new campus.
Right. Excited to be here. How's everything going out there in Utah? What's new with vExperts?
Things going well in Utah. We are actually in the middle of a storm this entire week, so lots of new snow coming in. vExpert updates, I've got a couple here. So we've got an upcoming webinar on HCX SaaS solution called HCX Plus. The date hasn't been scheduled yet, but that will come out in the next few days. HCX licenses for vExperts have been approved and will be going out to your Customer Connect portal through the vExpert application, hopefully this weekend. For content sharing, I put out an email. So if you want to share your vExpert content, go read that email. There's two different things you can do there. You can share it in Slack in the content sharing channel, and you can also put it into advocacy for sharing and channel growth. If you don't know what advocacy is, I did put a link in there for a training webinar that Noel Greer and myself did. And, we're on the vBarbecue podcast, so I want to talk about barbecue for a second. The VMware Explore vExpert party / community party that we're currently planning, we're looking to have that at the Pinball Museum. So if you're a vExpert and you remember the Pinball Museum, this was the place where we had the flamethrowers shooting up and the best barbecue in all of Las Vegas. It's actually the best barbecue I have ever had, and I do consider myself a barbecue connoisseur.
Yeah, I would say that it's important to call out, too, that the Pinball Museum moved to a much bigger Pinball Museum location right across the street from the MGM Grand, I think it is. So you can walk to it from the Strip this year. So it should be easy for everybody to get to. And, it is a much bigger building with more stuff. So it should be a lot of fun. We've been talking to them. They have party rooms so that we can, have a room that people can go in and get the food. We don't have to be out in the back parking lot like we were back in the day. That was fun. We didn't have tables. So it is a much better environment for us to run a big event like this. And I know that we're also talking about bringing in the Tanzu people and the VMUG people to make it kind of like one big, community gala with all the experts, everybody together. So I'm looking forward to that. We've talked about having Raghu come and reaching out to them. So a lot of excitement there. If you haven't gotten your Vegas travel plans for VMworld this year, you definitely should do that. And, not that I'm saying anything, but even if you just flew into Vegas for the party, you can't get the $2,000 for the ticket for the Explorer. Just going and getting yourself a cheap flight and coming in for the Tuesday night Pinball Museum, I'm sure would be worth it on its own right. So
I think that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna fly in for the party and I'm going home.
Yeah, just that's it. No, there's going to be a lot of good stuff.
Great.
I've been talking to people, upper management, and they are all in for Explore this year. Let me tell you, they are like, we're going to fund everything. I can announce that we're going to do the hackathon this year. We got funding for it. So, I feel like the needle is pegged back, right? This feels like 2019. Like they're.
Yeah, I feel the same exact way. Just on the conversations and the energy around the conversations and meetings we've had about Explore, I'm getting the same feeling that this is going to be a really, really great year for the show.
And, it's a weird thing because the tech world has kind of like, they've had some layoffs and that kind of stuff, Google and Facebook and all that. What I found is that was reflective of what last year's environments were like. So I think it took everybody a year. They're like a year lag. And now I feel like the pedal is back to the metal, right?
Yeah.
And like there's going to be a year lag before the hiring and all that stuff works its through the system. But I would say there's a lot of energy across the board. I'm not sure if maybe the world has rotated back to IT on-prem, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud. Like I feel like we're in the center of everybody's thought process now, right? Where it rotated into like pure cloud, and now I feel it's coming back to multi-cloud and hybrid cloud, and like and people are seeing the value of VMware in managing the multi-cloud environment, and that's a good lead into what we're going to be talking about on today's podcast. We have Steve Lord, who is product line manager at VMware, and he focuses on multi-cloud services. In particular, we're going to be talking about Oracle today, so I'm excited about that, to have Steve on the podcast. Before we go to Steve, anything else? Obviously VMworld US, is out there. You can the call for papers are out. VMworld Europe call papers are coming out, I think, sometime mid-May or somewhere. I will get that date for the next show. So a lot of activity in the call for papers happening, submissions. I don't think V Brown Bag has done the post for the call for VMTN V Brown Bag sessions yet, but we're getting that up. That should be up in the next week or two, so that if you want to do a community session, we'll have a lot of slots. We're going to have the community theater. We're going to have two separate theaters, the community theater and the code theater. So we're going to have code labs this year. We're going to do the hackathon this year. So plenty of places to submit your ideas for papers. So, start your piggy bank, start putting quarters in it if you're a community guy. Because you definitely want to come to Vegas this year. And you know what, Corey? We're just going to go crazy because it's Vegas, right?
Yep, absolutely. Back in Vegas, I'm excited.
We did as much crazy as we could afford last year. But this year, upper management is like, yeah, we want to pay for all we're giving you money to do stuff. So should be a lot of fun. Excited about that. And with that, let's get on with the guts of the podcast. Corey, thanks a lot for stopping by.
Awesome. Thank you.
Steve, as if you've ever been on the podcast before, if you're new, we always start with, because we're a community podcast, who are you? What's your career arc look like? How long have you been doing what you've been doing? What do you do for VMware? Just give us a sense of, you have 5 minutes here. Tell us who you are and how you got here.
Sure. All right. Well, yeah, thanks, Eric. Again, appreciate being on the podcast. First time caller, and happy to be here for you guys. All right, so I'm a product line manager here at VMware. I've been here for about a year and a half now. And I guess to get to this trajectory, first you have to get a degree in aerospace engineering, where you graduate during a recession and your aerospace engineering field is dead. And so you wander in the wilderness for a few years. And then luckily enough, you kind of have a brother-in-law who says, I'm in IT, Steve, you should try to go into IT. And so that's what I did. I switched my careers. You kind of volunteer to do extra IT work at the company you're working for, and kind of ground roots, and learned how to do, server administration and everything else. And that's kind of how I started that. And then lo and behold, go ahead.
So I got a question on you on this, because, we do this question for everybody that comes on the podcast, and we've been doing this podcast weekly for, 14 years. So we're at 639 episodes, and I've heard 600 different stories of how people get it. And they're all the same, which is, I was this, and now I found that I really like that, and my career didn't work out where I thought it was going to go for whatever reason. So the question for you is, when you were growing up as a kid, maybe into your teens, were you a tinkerer? Did you like to kind of, solve problems and be kind of with you looking at things and solving them, right? So
yeah, I did. At first I thought, okay, maybe I'll try to go into software. It's one of those things I had. My first computer was really a Commodore 64. Right. So that dates me a little bit, but it's kind of like I look at one of those magazines and be like, oh, here's this language. Just see if you can mimic this and type that in and try to program something. So
yeah, we all have that same history. I think if you're an IT guy, you've come a large percentage of us have come up through that. I had gotten a Commodore 32, and I used it for about 3 weeks, and I was like, the Commodore 64 came out, so I unscrewed the screws, I took out the motherboard. I think I went to Kmart and I bought a Commodore 64, brought it home, and then I took the motherboard out and swapped them and returned the Commodore 64 with a Commodore 32 motherboard in it.
That's great.
Yeah, so and it's one of those things that, if you're an IT person, it's probably you were taking things apart, trying to solve things, and for me, this is the best career in the world because you get to stay geeky, and then get to play with hardware and then get to implement things. So I
Yeah.
really enjoy that. Yeah, yeah. So then you ended up at VMware. I assume you were IT administrator for in
Yeah, multiple years.
Who-
My
who were-
first version of VSX was 2.012. So I remember way back in the day. It was probably around 2003, I had to think, is when we started working on that.
So we always say that the best people at VMware were the best people, best customers, right? So who recruited you in? Where did you work before you ended up getting recruited to the dark side and coming to the
vendor?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I worked for a service provider called Axiom, who's since then rebranded to Insono.
Mm-hmm.
So I started working in managed services world. So the IT company I worked for, where I first started learning ESX, they outsourced their entire IT department to a service provider. Actually, the best thing that ever happened to me. Sounds a little bit scary, but it actually worked out really well for me. Because then I got to get exposure to all kinds of different technical, and technology and different services.
Right.
And I started really delving into the service provider field, and I started asking a lot of business questions of people, and they're like, Steve, you sound like somebody that should go into solution architecture and become a solution architect. And I said, okay, that sounds really good. I like building things. It kind of goes back to my engineering, wanting to do engineering related work. And so went into that, did that for about 2 years. And then they split our team apart into product management and solution architecture. And I followed the product side because I started getting more involved in the business. I started really wanted to understand, the finances, the margins, pricing, customers, working with marketing, but still having some roots into that technology piece, right? So it's starting to take the technology and the things you're building that really have that technology foundation and then bring it out to your customers. And, for me, product management is, the epitome, that's the best of everything, right? It's the ultimate, if you're never bored, there's always something you can work on that's going to make your day different, right? So it could be a good customer, working with them. So meeting with customers to find out what their wants and their needs are and getting some good feedback, things that enable
Nice.
to make your product better.
Right.
And then working with the engineering teams and everyone else. So that's product management's a great field for people that want to get into it.
Very fun. So let's talk about where you're at now, what you're working on, and why you're here, which is multi-cloud services and Oracle. So
Yeah.
I guess I'll come up with a premise. You can validate it for me, and then we can go into what you guys are offering. For me, the multi-cloud services bit is more of the same, right? Which is when I started, we had racks of machines, data center. I operated a data center. We started to virtualize it, and I'm basically virtualizing hardware in racks, right? And I'm like, wow, this is great. Then I can vMotion things around, and I can manage my servers with VMs, and I can abstract out the hardware from the payloads, right? And it's like, okay. And then I have multiple racks in a data center, and that was pretty much my life, right? I look at today, and I don't really see anything different in the multi-cloud. You have cloud operators, right? Whether it's Azure, Oracle, or IBM, or Amazon, or others, Alibaba, and then you have my payloads, and I have my operating system workloads, and I kind of just want to do the same thing. I want to have a layer of software that allows me to abstract out my payloads from the hardware that it's sitting at. Now, that's an oversimplification, but I feel like when we talk about multi-cloud and multi-cloud management, multi-cloud services, I don't see I just see like it's a vSphere layer across multiple clouds that I can actually then abstract out the dependency on the cloud vendors, hardware at any given moment, right? So
yeah, you kind of nailed it pretty well there. I will tell you that what's different now about working with the multi-cloud and working with the different hyperscalers that you touched on is now the global approach, right? So you or your business, you were in your data center, and maybe you had multiple data centers with your company. But now when you start adding in the hyperscalers, I can go anywhere in the world, right? And I can have that VMware environment anywhere in the world, and I can get it up and running relatively quickly. So it's more than the multi-cloud really enables almost from a business perspective. I don't have to go and try to find a data center. I don't have to find a colo facility. I don't have to buy Dell hardware and stand it up in some other location around the world. I can go out to one of these hyperscalers, one of these VMware related hyperscalers, and spin up a VMware environment and know that my applications that are running in my own on-prem data center will work in that hyperscaler location. And that's part of what we're doing with Cloud Director Service. So it's the Cloud Director capability. It's really a layer that sits on top of vCenter, if you will, and it's managing, it's enabling a cloud-like look and feel for those end users that want to use a cloud solution. So people that are already used to using, let's say, Amazon EC2, go and spin up an Amazon EC2 instance. We're doing that with VMware environments. So I can go in, very self-service oriented, very multi-tenant oriented. So I'm a developer and I have applications. I can log into the Cloud Director portal and see what applications that I have cataloged already for me, or spin up raw new images. I could deploy those workloads out through the UI into any multiple different clouds I want to. And so it's one portal in which to go in and log into and be like, oh, do I need to run this in my on-prem data center? Do I need to run this in Amazon? And why would I want to do some of these different hyperscalers? Well, maybe I have an application that's running in vSphere, but I want to have it communicate with new native application development that I've also done. And so now I have this low latency connection between an Amazon EC2 instance talking with VMC on AWS, VMware-based virtual machine that has applications running there, and they could be right next to each other. And you're able to do that with our different software elements. And then give it that layer of multi-tenancy. So, and what's interesting about multi-tenancy too is that that's not just for service providers. So, the big service providers, they'll have their own tenants that'll come in. Those tenants might be competitors to each other, like a Coke and Pepsi type of situation, right? They can run on the exact same equipment, but never know that they're even there, right? Because the VMware software, the NSX layer, the Cloud Director software service, that's separating those two. But it's really enabling that service provider to leverage that environment and leverage their own services on top to be able to give clouds to the Coke and Pepsi developers, right? They can do self-service capability to go in and deploy their own applications. And the same holds true for enterprise customers. Well, they'll have different lines of business. So your corporate IT scenario, that we've enabled that corporate IT person to be a cloud provider to their own business.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, when you recognize this, I can see the software engineers as they're building this, right? And, you kind of have vCenter that allows you to have multiple data centers plugged in, and you got all your ESX servers exposed in that. And then we're building, we build a new app, and then we're building the objects that represent your vCenters or your ESX servers in these different places. And then you realize that when you start to build repository or object groupings of these guys, that you can actually do multi-tenancy and offer the enterprises that are using Director like these buckets that are their own buckets of capacity that are running in the clouds, right? And then running in multiple clouds. And you start realizing in software you can build this whole domain architecture of these buckets of things, and it scales, right? And you're like, wow, we've got a product that actually could do this. And then you build it, and then there it is, right?
Yeah, you can give them quotas. If it's a development group that's running a lab environment, let them go crazy in the lab, but not have it impact the rest of the environment, right? So you can have these different virtual machines running on the same physical hosts, but you don't have that noisy neighbor capability, right? So you can really lock and isolate people into their own little world, their own little domains, do whatever they need to do there, but not impact, production systems that could be running right next door.
So is your product line manager, is Director one of your products that you manage?
Yeah, Cloud Director Service.
Okay.
And so, yeah, if we were to have this conversation on last year, I would say Cloud Director Service is uni-cloud, not multi-cloud, right? We were just VMware Cloud on AWS. And so the real core of 2022 was to expand into the multi-cloud world, right? So GCVE, be able to use it for on-prem environments. We had Azure VMware Solution, AVS. And then just this past December, we enabled it for Oracle Cloud VMware Solution. So that's we've kind of really built out that multi-cloud fabric because, if you think about it, every company has their own, who are we a big partner with? Are we a big Microsoft shop that we want to use Azure? Are we a big Amazon that we want to use, VMC on AWS? Are we an Oracle shop that we want to use OCVS? So that usually from a business perspective now, there's usually a really good business driver, whereas why somebody wants to go to one of those hyperscalers. It's not always, what are the capabilities, but a lot of times it's also a business driver.
Yeah, I know that I've been using Alibaba, right? Not for cloud services, but I'm using Alibaba for other stuff, right? And all of a sudden, Alibaba starts marketing to me their enterprise package, right? They're like, oh, if you're purchasing this stuff on Alibaba, great. If you're selling stuff on Alibaba, that's also great. Oh, if you want to host stuff on Alibaba, that's also great. We'll give you the whole deal. And then their account reps calling me, going, hey, how would you like to do all this stuff? I don't want to do that. I just bought some stuff on Alibaba, but I could see if I were running a business and you start getting these deals for a particular cloud vendor that maybe because you're using it for other places, you get packages. And I know that VMware has done this where we bundle up things, we give you discount on cloud services and all this stuff because we're doing other business with you. And so I might really like running on AWS, but I might consider Alibaba. And then I don't want to leave vSphere. So all of a sudden I do have the need to manage different cloud relationships just because I have different business relationships with different providers of services. Right?
Yeah, and to even add even more complexity, it really starts becoming true multi-cloud. You might have developers that really need to develop something in Amazon, but your business really wants to do core work in Azure. So now you have your on-prem data center, which isn't going away anywhere anytime soon, if ever. Then you have workloads that are running in Azure and workloads that are running in Amazon. Now I have 3 different types of environments in which I really need to start to, how do I manage and maintain that, right? It's hard. Developers, all right, I got to use Amazon tools to go in Amazon. I got to use maybe Azure tools to go in Azure. I got to use VMware tools to go into VMware. Cloud Director Service is one of those tools that it kind of is an overlay across all those environments. One tool to kind of go in, log into, and see all your different workloads and to be able to deploy into those workloads. And anything you could do within the user interface, you could do with APIs as well. So we're very API friendly, especially for the developer world.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And we're getting a lot of feedback that this is all becoming important, right? Like that people are actually buying into this model.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
The enterprise.
Yeah, business reasons, right? So if you don't want to spend the CapEx anymore, people that are wanting to leave the data center. So you see that a lot in the enterprise world, right? The data center is more of a cost center than it is a profit center. And so, hey, if I don't want to spend the CapEx and I'd rather I'll get a little financial geeky, want to spend the OpEx instead and
Right.
want to do subscription, then I want to go into, one of these hyperscaler worlds. And that's what we're doing with some customers today, helping them with their workloads and migration tools to move out of their data center and into, let's say, like an Oracle Cloud VMware solution.
And we can't ignore the news article that came out, I think last week or a week and a half ago, where I forget the company that announced this, but some big enterprise company, I want to say Alamo or somebody like that, they were a rental car company or something. It was not tech, I don't think, but did some analysis and decided to move it all back on-prem. Right. And their yearly savings, and maybe it was a 3-year savings, I don't know, but they moved off of cloud back to prem, and they were saving $450 million a year, right? Where they just decided that they wanted to come back, right? They wanted to go back on prem. And that's the beautiful thing about, the multi-cloud systems is your data centers are still part of that cloud offering. And if you want to start migrating X amount of workloads, some percentage, whatever, just to manage cost, you can also do that.
Yeah, I have a big mantra, and that's why I say that the on-prem data center isn't going away. There's a mantra we've had where it's the right workload, the right place at the right time. So today, maybe your workload, that application, and I'll talk in terms of the application, does it belong in my on-prem data center? Because maybe I'm communicating, there's still a lot of, I'll call them legacy services, whether it's mainframe or other IBMI type services that, you need to have those applications communicate with, but maybe you're redeveloping those apps into native cloud. Well, now maybe I want to move my VMware application into one of the hyperscaler environments to be near that native cloud application, but still have my on-prem environment. So I don't see the on-prem environment going away ever because there are some financial reasons. Again, you might want to spend CapEx as a company and not spend OpEx. It really will depend on the company and how they want to spend their capital.
Yeah.
So they want to do it on application development, or they want to spend it on infrastructure and run that infrastructure a long time.
Yeah, I'm a big CapEx fan myself, right? I look at OpEx and I go, oh my Yeah, I know, but I like to invest so that I can keep my OpEx footprint small, so that when you look at like how much dollars do I need every quarter, I can adjust that dollars way down and still run, because I've already made the CapEx investments, right? And so
Yep.
I tend to like that, but other people love the idea of expense it as you go, right? That kind of
Yeah,
scenario.
there is that. And there's also, hey, do OpEx when, again, like in my other example, I don't want to spin up a data center in some other location. I would just rather do OpEx and run that application, a small application in a data center that I don't normally, I'm not located in, another country perhaps,
So
right?
I'm
That's where it really makes a beautiful multi-cloud capability, right? On-prem
right.
merged in with some areas where I just needed to spin up something really fast. And that's a lot of the feedback I get from our customers too. It's like, hey, Steve, I really like I was trying to get some negative feedback about Cloud Director Service, and I was having a hard time actually getting negative feedback. They're like, Steve, it saves me money, and I'm able to spin up and test things what I want to very easily. And then I'm also able to run it in production very easily. So it works. It's doing exactly what I wanted it to do. And you guys are expanding into these different multi-cloud environments. As I expand into multi-cloud, you're doing exactly what I need it to do. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah, and there is something friendly about just having your VMs, right? Like it's like I feel like it's my safety blanket, where I go, okay, and I still got VMs. It's all something
yeah,
that I already know. We've got a lot of training, we got a lot of practice around operating VMs and how to run things efficiently. And now I'm just adding that cloud element into it versus having to do a lift and shift of the whole new processes. So I get that. One question for you is, what are people saying are the challenges to this? Do you get kind of like when they go, well, I heard earlier today, like some of the big customers, like it's all about getting training to understand the cloud aspects of things, right? That the director enables the management of it, but it's like understanding the details of cloud specifics. What's your experience there?
so there are a couple of pieces. The IT admins that are running that are becoming that cloud provider to the end user, they're the ones that are going to have to learn, okay, well, how do I connect this into an OCVS environment? How does Oracle work? How does Oracle work compared to Azure environment? So the connectivity between maybe my data center to those Oracle data centers or those Azure data centers, that's where there's going to be a little bit of a difference. The good news to the end user that is using like a cloud director, to them,
Mhm.
no impact at all.
They don't know.
It's because we've abstracted out the entire infrastructure layer to them, and they just see it as another virtual data center that might say, well, this one's the Google virtual data center that's running vSphere. And this is my on-prem data center. This one's the VMC on AWS data center. And so I can just deploy my workloads very easily into any one of those environments. But the learning experience, though, is going to be for then the core IT admin group that is using it. So they're the ones that be like, okay, I need to learn a little bit about Oracle and their OCI, right? Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. And how does that environment work? And then how do I also not, because the beauty of running, let's say with an OCVS, running your VMware VMs there, is that you want to tie that in to the native cloud services. That's really something I push really hard, so that you get the best of both worlds. And it might be as simple as, hey, I got object storage that's running in the native cloud. Well, I want to tie that object storage to my VMware environment. I want to tie in Oracle native database services to my VMware VMs and applications that are running. And so I can leverage the Oracle infrastructure and what Oracle does great with databases, and then run what's great with my applications that are running within a VMware environment and tie those two together. And you could do that on a per tenant basis. Or even the individual IT shop can develop their own shared services amongst those tenants and leverage the backend native cloud services. And you could do that within any one of these different cloud environments. So that's where I see the big growth this year for me, is building out these solutions, because I like to call them solutions, where it's like, okay, we've enabled vSphere to run, with Cloud Director Service, and you got a cloud environment. Great, you got two applications, Cloud Director Service running with OCVS. But what about everything else? What about disaster recovery type solutions? What about my monitoring? What about my backups that I still need run in those environments? And to me, that's like that's how you really well round a solution that people are used to building in their data center, that they kind of want to mimic at least that same type of solution running in these different VMware environments across the globe.
Yeah, I guess there's also just how to get comfortable with that you've got all the box checked, right? Because it is a little bit scary when you start to set this up. How does it operate? How am I backing it up? How do I have all the components? Do I have all the network right? Do I have security right? Is this going to implement that? What's the average length of a typical engagement? Or how much do you get exposed to, like, if we have the Enterprise 2000, you probably get projects that come across. You're not actually implementing, but your product. Do you ever get called into some of these to talk about the products, and do you get to see roadmap, kind of like what is the roadmap for some of these enterprises that are doing these projects?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said sometimes the sales process could be very long, just because the customers want to test things. They have their own financial reviews. They're comparing different versions. They'll compare different VMware products together, right? So say, hey, there's a customer right now, we're working with them. They're testing CDS with Azure VMware solution and versus VMware Cloud and AWS, and what makes the most sense for them. So they want to compare and contrast different offerings, and it's not just comparing VMware products to each other, because they're going to be very similar, right? It's VMware, it's vSphere, it runs. It's the native cloud aspects of it too, and what parts of the world, and then again the business contracts that they have. So a lot of these deals that I've seen. If it's a larger company, and this is what I'm thinking of now, they have 20,000 plus virtual machines. We've been talking with them for 9 months now. We have a couple of those. And then some of the smaller ones where, hey, I just wanted to spin up 3 ESX hosts. Okay, that they just were talking for a couple of weeks. They ran a proof of concept for 30 days. They said, okay, this is what we're used to running when, in our on-prem data center. We'll run it here now in OCVS. All right, it's just the 30 days to test it out, and then they go and purchase as they need to.
I assume that we have a partner ecosystem that's also, behind selling to the mid-tier, the commercial tier, right, in this space, right? And I would assume maybe even those will pick up a little bit. Well, maybe not, because it's multi-cloud, and commercial vendors probably just choose one cloud and go with that. I'm not sure that maybe any of that.
No, I mean, I work for a service provider. So the interesting thing about being a service provider is, those tenants that come in, your end customer that comes in, they say, you know what, I'm an Azure shop. I need you to be able to support me in Azure. And another one comes and says, I'm an Amazon shop. I need you to support me in Amazon. I'm an Oracle shop, but you better support me in Oracle. So those service providers out there, they're already extremely multi-cloud oriented, right? They're using really the four, I'll call them the 4 big hyperscalers that we have, that we engage with, Google, Microsoft, Oracle, and Amazon, that they all have to leverage like a VMware environment. So again, when you think about it like this, when you're using Cloud Director software, this tenant, I've enabled them to see OCVS, Google, and on-prem. The other tenant, maybe they have Azure and just on-prem. So you can separate it at the tenant level using the Cloud Director software, what each one of these tenants are able to get access to. And it's that service provider in that case that is buying the equipment from the hyperscaler and making the cloud environment and using the Cloud Director service layered on top to enable clouds for each one of these different end user tenants.
So when we host the director service, it's just we just do it ourselves. We don't give people choices of where they're actually running that. We just deliver that, and we cloud service whatever cloud vendor we're choosing to use to offer that. Maybe AWS, maybe our own. I don't know how we deliver that.
Yeah, it runs in quote our VMware cloud, and it's runs in different locations throughout the world. So we have it set up in, to cover North America, Europe, Asia Pacific. Yeah, so we're spread pretty well throughout the world right now.
Is Cloud Director, do we sell this as an on-prem offering as well, or is it?
There is.
Yeah,
yep, there's an on-prem offering. So that's just VMware Cloud Director.
Right.
And so you would install that into your data center. The Cloud Director service is the SaaS offering. So it's the SaaS version. So instead of you running it, we're running it for you, and we're connecting into your environment.
And I would assume that, people that are trying to really build out cloud services would probably go towards the cloud service over time, just because then it's just another thing they don't have to worry about, right? And
and so in one of those areas, because the tinkering is using the software. The tinkering isn't hey, I'm running the Cloud Director appliances in my data center, because they're just kind of appliances that are there. You still have to do some work to build out the environment, but one of those feedback items I got from my customer was, well, instead of me spending days kind of building out a new VMware Cloud Director environment, Steve, I spun up a new Cloud Director instance in 15 minutes, and I got it connected into my new Oracle OCVS environment in an hour, right? I was able to start testing workloads, a little bit over an hour later. So, and that's somebody that already knows that environment, already knows the Cloud Director and how to use OCVS. But that's what they're able to do, right? They're able to spin up these environments quickly and then destroy them quickly too if they don't need it any longer.
Yeah, it's like when we went with our community platform, we about 3 years ago just decided we were not going to run on-prem anymore, and we bit the bullet and went and migrated all the SaaS from the vendor, right? And the beautiful thing is the vendor is pretty good at running it, right? Like and so there is a lot of benefits. You got some negatives, right? But you get a lot of benefits from a vendor who specializes in running this 15 other times for other companies, and right, they're just running ours.
Other experience.
Yeah.
And then it's the global approach too, right? So with Cloud Director making a connection, we do need to have a global footprint. So instead, again, you having to spin up in systems in some other location in the world, you just spin it up in Cloud Director service, and you just point, hey, I want to run this out of Tokyo. Okay, great. We'll spin up a Cloud Director service instance in Tokyo and have it connect to your different Asia Pacific region, whether it's an Oracle, Google environment, et cetera, in that part of the world.
And it seems like VMware actually has gotten pretty good at this. 5 years ago when we did vCloud Air and we had a bunch of hokey cloud things that we were trying to do, and we really didn't understand it very well, right? Like I would say that, make me nervous running anything, letting VMware run any of my stuff. Nowadays, like VMware is getting to be a tier 1 cloud service provider, providing our apps, and our software in a cloud environment. And I would say that we're accepted now as a cloud offering vendor, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what you're seeing is now a lot of the SaaSification, I guess, if you will, of a lot of our different VMware products. So those products that you would have spun up yourself in your data center, we're just running it as a SaaS offering, but you're still managing it, right? You just have that connection into where you're located, where your vSphere environment is located. And now you're, there's no real benefit to kind of running it yourself,
Right.
And trying to manage it and make sure it's up and running, as opposed to using it. The benefit is using the software in your normal everyday basis.
Unless, of course, you're like the government or something where you have a really on-prem, everything has to be bolted in and on-prem, and like there's not even you're using sneakerware across the networks. There's reasons to do it
sovereign cloud, right?
Right.
And that's where the sovereign cloud kicks in, and that's why I really don't think we're gonna see ever a going away of on-prem type deployments, because you're gonna have that sovereign cloud need, especially where you see that as in Europe a lot. Right? They're very interested in the sovereign cloud solutions.
So the Oracle expansion, we had Oracle in the title here when we booked you. The Oracle is just because now we're offering this we can manage your services in the Oracle Cloud, I would assume.
Correct. And just to touch on that though a little bit. So there's always some little nuances or differences between some of the different environments or those hyperscaler partners, right? What do they do maybe a little bit differently? And what they do in the Oracle side is they almost treat it as if it's running in your data center. You get to tinker so much with that or OCVS environment. If you want to, you can, and you can keep the version levels of the software, static if you wanted to for quite a while, and maybe you're having that match with your on-prem environment too, right? You still want to try to keep those as supported versions, right? You don't want to go out of support because that makes your life a little bit more difficult. But you're able to do what you want to do with these environments. And, you can tie in, NAS type software, or I'm sorry, NAS storage into those environments. So what I see a lot lately, especially with people looking at an Oracle environment, is to do this, DR type solutions into the hyperscaler. And the reason why is because one, DR, where everybody hates disaster recovery. It's just an insurance policy that no one ever wants to pay for. Well, I can make it really cheap. I can spin up just a couple of servers to kind of get that initial footprint running for my disaster recovery, have a whole bunch of NAS storage connected to it from behind. So I'm doing my replication as DR from my on-prem data center into that OCVS environment. And then if I do have a disaster, I can spin up servers very quickly. So it's a really great way to keep my disaster recovery solution lower cost, but still be very responsive for a DR solution when I do have a disaster. So, that's a little bit of a nuance. I think that Oracle has a great, has a nice little advantage there, I would say, and be able to let you, really play with that environment from an administrator role type perspective. So if you didn't need more control over it, you have that ability to do what you need to with that environment and still tie in some of those other cloud services from Oracle into that environment.
Right. One of the things we usually talk about a little bit is as we come into momentum season and explore any sessions that are going to be covering director and direct, obviously managing services across your clouds using director. Have you guys submitted any papers? Are you going to be at Explore this year? What's your outbound strategy for the rest of 2023?
Yeah, so my goal is to get accepted into Explore, right? So right now there's a submission process, and I think everything is due next week, Friday. So we're submitting our proposals for Explore. I was in Explore last year where we had a session, so I'm looking to go to Explore again this year and really tout more of that multi-cloud capabilities. There's some other interesting things. I really probably shouldn't talk about them. They're in our incubation labs. That we're looking to do some work there that we'll be announcing more at Explore this year. Assuming we get accepted, we better get accepted. And so, yeah, and further enabling multi-cloud and interoperability.
I got the admin console here. I'll just accept you right now. There we
go.
go.
There you go, man. I didn't know I had to talk to just you, Eric. That's great.
Yeah, that's it. I run it all good. So you got some papers that you're submitting, so that'll be good. And where do you live? Where are you located?
So I'm outside of Chicago. I just live northwest of Chicago.
Very nice. My son goes to University of Chicago, and the VMUG board meeting is going to be in Chicago, and so I will be in Chicago a couple times this year. So it is.
All right.
I've been told it's been wet and cold, right?
We've had a cold March. We've had I would say colder than normal. Spring has not arrived yet. Spring has not arrived in Chicago.
So to get back to Explore, it's not that bad a trip for you. You just hop on a plane and you can come to the Pinball Museum and hang out with us. And
it sounds like a party.
Yeah. We'll have to get you there for sure and make that happen. So you've got Explore on the ticket. Do you guys do any of the cloud vendor shows as well, like AWS reInvent or others where you're now we're becoming a true SaaS provider? Do we get to checkbox any other SaaS places?
Yeah, well, I'm hoping to, right? We'll see if the travel opens up a little bit more this year, like you were talking earlier. Where if we can get moving to other places, but otherwise we want to get the roadshow going more again and be able to do some more travel.
Sock puppets. You just do sock puppets on Zoom, right? That get that going.
There you go.
Good. What else is so in as you look into the next year with regards to vCloud Director and the technologies, what are your hopes and where are you guys trying to go with the product without obviously being under NDA? Where do you think you're going and what excites you?
I think right now building out the solution set more is what really excites me. Taking not only other VMware products but other third-party products and tying them into these solutions. Again, across different multi-cloud type environments, right? That's really our goal. How do we help a customer and build out the reference architecture, do a lot of testing in our own labs to show that, hey, these different products, they all interact well with each other. They're all supported to interact with each other. Because that's really what our customers are looking for, right? They want solutions that work, whether it works in their on-prem environment or the GCV environment or the OCVS environment. They want these solutions to be very simple and expandable to different cloud environments, because when they're able to do that, they're able to enable that for their own end users that are using those environments.
Yeah,
so they can give a very consistent experience across all these different multi-cloud environments. And that's my goal this year, is to enable that consistent experience across different cloud environments and really reduce the complexity of having different clouds.
Yeah, it's interesting because we were talking, we had a couple of guys yesterday about Chat GPT, right? And the fact that Chat GPT can write really good code now, and that they've managed to somehow harvest must be all the code bases on GitHub, right? And then now if you ask Chat GPT, build me an app that does XYZ, it'll go write pretty good code. Well, you wonder how that could be done. And the answer is, there's a finite number of apps that people are asking for, right? And once you figure out how to write them, you can just rewrite them. That thing uses them. And to your point of there's only X number of big apps that you're running or doing, a lot of enterprises use them. And if you can actually get those bundled and certified and available in a catalog that director can manage and deploy to different clouds, actually there's a finite number. Maybe it's 10,000, maybe it's 6,000, but it's not an insurmountable strategy to build these things and get them to the point where you can just go deploy them easily in a multi-cloud environment and have it work, right? And then if you do that, you've simplified the problem, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the key to that too is that the infrastructure underneath is a vSphere based environment, right? So that's where if your application runs on a virtual machine today in your on-prem data center, it's going to run in any one of these different multi-cloud locations too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Good. Okay, where do people learn more about you or the product? Do you guys have a blog? Where do you do the bulk of your marketing? So if people wanted to go pay attention, what would they do?
Yeah, you can you can go to the main corporate VMware.com site, look up the Cloud Director Service product in the product list. That's one area. It's the cloud solutions area. And what we have there then is, that's the main launch point, right? Under there is our blogs, our reference architecture,
A lot of resources.
and how we,
Right.
all the resources, admins, documents, and how to run and set up Cloud Director Service and with your different cloud environments that you're interested in.
Nice. So VMware.com, look up Cloud Director and look at the resource page. We've been talking to the VMware people because the podcasts now are on podcast.vmware.com and they get keywords. And so with the titles and such, and we want to actually list the podcast search now with like vCloud Director in the resource section of vCloud Director, so that if you go to the resources, there'll be a podcast, search link and show you the podcasts that have talked about vCloud Director, and this podcast should show up in that list. We haven't built that yet, but that's one of the things that we're talking to them about, so that not only all the community assets and blogs are listed there, but also, a podcast list. Right?
Yeah, just make sure there's Cloud Director and there's Cloud Director Service. So Cloud Director Service is the multi-cloud capability. Cloud Director on-prem only.
Yeah. Cloud Director Service. Yep. So that's good to know. Good to know. All right. As we come up to the top of the hour, I usually like to ask, because we are, if you want to see what Steve looks like, we stream this on youtube.com/vbarbecue, VBarbecue, VBARBECUE. You can go there, VBarbecue, see what Steve looks like. And then we always ask people, Steve, you're out of Chicago. Do they make barbecue pizza down, in Chicago? I know we got the deep dish, but I don't know if they do. What's your favorite barbecue? Do you ever get to barbecue? And if so, what do you like?
So barbecue is not necessarily big in the Chicago area, right? If you want steak, you come to Chicago. I'll put it out there. Chicago style pizza, the best pizza in the world.
Of course.
However, I will tell you the best barbecue I ever had, believe it or not, was outside of Boston.
No, there you go.
Now, people might laugh. Okay, yeah. It was at a little nondescript place called Texas Barbecue. Now, I happened to be traveling there with EMC. So going back old school, I was looking at we were buying a V block.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was with the VMC rep and he was, hey, you know what? He's from Texas, right? Talked about his big smoker that he has and everything else, how he smoked this food, and it was great. So we go to a seafood restaurant. He's like, he sees this Texas barbecue sign across the street. He's like, oh, I'm going to go there. I'll be right back. Mm-hmm. Well, we don't see him at all for dinner. He never showed up. He comes right at the end. He's like, okay, guys, I know you just ate, but you got to come over here across the street. He's like, I'm from Texas. This guy grew up 20 miles from me, so I trust him. You're right. I trust the barbecue that he made. So it was all this. Wasn't good enough the guy was from Texas. It had to be from his area of Texas. And so we go there And this owner brings out a giant platter of brisket. And I have to tell you, it was probably the best food I ever ate. And I was already full from a dinner. And we devoured this entire, giant 2-foot wide platter of brisket that he had smoked. And it was amazing, right? It just melted in your mouth. It had this smoky flavor, smoky smell, just a great sense of a smell and flavor to this brisket. So, and I could never remember what this place was. It's just some little Texas barbecue, little restaurant that had the best barbecue I ever had. No sauce, no barbecue sauce. Didn't need any of that. This food was it was perfect.
Yeah, it's funny because, if you look at different regions, different barbecue, the center of California, mid California down, got a lot of cattle ranches there. They'll tell you, no, you don't use any sauce, right? When you're barbecuing, you smoke it and cook it, and that's it, right? Like, you don't need any smoke. You just let the meat do the talking with the smoke and the wood and mesquite or whatever. It can be amazingly good, right? And
yeah.
And it is an individual thing. So you're right in the sense that it's just a person that's gotten really skilled, right? That then can just make some incredible barbecue. So
yeah. And the CMC rep who was he's like, yep, it's pretty good stuff. And the owner's like, yep. Because we're like, wow, this is the best food I ever had. And they're just shook his head. Yep.
Nice.
That confidence that he knew how to cook his brisket.
Very good. So Steve Lord, are you on Twitter?
Yes.
All right.
I want to say Lord VMware is where you'd find me.
Lord VMware. That's a great one. I love that. I'm going to have to go give you a follow. Go give Lord VMware a follow. Maybe he'll hang out on Twitter a little bit more, because when I said it, he kind of paused and went, am I on Twitter? Let me see. But great that you're on the show. Great that people can go give you a follow. Give Lord VMware, LORD I would assume, a follow and say hello to him. As always, great to have you come on for our lunchtime podcast and talk to us about VMware vCloud Director Service, and tell us the lay of the land. It's certainly exciting, a lot of momentum, and I hope you get your session.
All right, thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.
Have a great rest of your day, and we'll be back again next week as always, usually 12 to 1 on Wednesdays. You feel free to drop in. Thanks a lot.
Bye, everyone.